Hey, how you doing? My name is Jonathan, aka New Grad 23, and I'm here to talk to you about getting the most out of college. You know, in a time when we're in an economic recession, a lot of graduate students and undergraduate students are leaving college and finding that, it's hard to find employment to get that first job. And student loan debt is at an all-time high. There's just a lot of things going on to make people question, is college still worth it? And if so, what are things that I can do to make the most out of college? Well, I'm here to answer some of those questions for you. Myself, I'm a recent college grad, and I was able to graduate college and start a job and, just start living life after school. And so I think that there are some things that I experienced during school that I want to share with people that are currently in college and even with new graduates to kind of help them get their footing and make the most out of that college investment. And the first piece of advice that I'm going to offer, I'm going to be pretty general and broad with my advice in this video. And the first piece of advice that I'm going to offer is that just remember that college is a very individual endeavor. And so what I mean by that is it's okay, to read the stats on Yahoo or USA News and say, okay, well, if I see this type of major, I'll make this kind of money. And on this website, it says that if I do X, Y, and Z, then I'll get a job. And go online and say, well, if I take this instructor, then, that's going to be easy. I'll get an A. And if I take this instructor, it's going to be hard. It's okay to kind of gather as much information as you can about different aspects of college and the college experience. But remember that at the end of the day, it's individual. It's all about you. It does me no good to know that a person similar to me graduated college, and made $80,000. Because that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do it. And it doesn't, at the same time, make any difference for me to read all of these horror stories in the news and say, people that graduate college and, they have this major and it's the same major as me and, 80% of them are unable to find a job. Those are just statistics and you don't know the individual stories that made up all of those people's lives and led them to that outcome. And so what you need to realize is that it's good to gather information, but remember that at the end of the day, you're the only one that can control what you do during college, and you're the only one that can really take the steps to make college worth it for you. And so another thing that I would suggest doing in college is, think about what are you doing in school besides just attending classes. And this is one thing that I think a lot of students and even new graduates are missing is that, we go to school, we have fun, we learn a lot, we work hard, make a good GPA, or maybe, your GPA struggles a little bit. And then we wake up in senior year and we're like, oh, let me put together this resume and try to impress this company and, convince them to pay me $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 coming out. But at the same time, we haven't really prepared ourselves outside of the classroom with experiences that would, make us more marketable in the workplace. And so a couple of things that you can do if you're still in college right now, think about extracurricular activities that are marketable. So it's okay to be in, intramural sports teams and sororities and fraternities and things like that. But make sure that you're also doing something that has a correlation to the job. So if you're in one of those groups, try to get a leadership position and, not just any old leadership position. I'd say, try to be the treasurer or the president or the person that's in charge of the marketing and things like that, because those types of roles in organizations show an employer that, okay, this guy knows how to talk to people. This guy knows how to, handle and watch a budget. This guy knows how to communicate. Also, in addition to those types of organizations, think about taking part in undergraduate research. Or if you're a graduate student, think about you should definitely be doing research. What I mean by research is, for those that aren't familiar with it, is that research kind of adds to your classroom experience by allowing you to work with a professor or by yourself on a project or a question in your field of study. So myself, for example, I was a political science major and I was interested in international politics. So in addition to taking all of my classes in political science and international affairs, I did a research project that kind of talked about energy politics in the former Soviet Union. And it got really complex and stuff like that. But basically what I did was I didn't just go to school and sit in the class, but I asked the question that hadn't been answered yet. And I, took steps and wrote a substantial paper on a topic that was relevant to my field. And so that kind of added something to my resume when I go to an employer and they're saying, so what have you done besides go to school? And I can say, well, I use, my analysis skills with statistics and math and even my communication and writing skills to put together this 25-page report on energy politics or something like that. And, that kind of gives the employer the idea that, he's proactive. This person is, they can deal with data, they can do analytical work, and they can also present, because I did end up presenting that paper as well. So, if you're an engineer or if you're in the sciences, obviously there's a lot of questions that, you can tackle in the mathematics and the computer science field and, chemistry and biology. So just think about that. And even if you're in a social science field like I was, there's talk to your professors and see what types of research they're doing, because professors aren't just teachers. They spend a lot of time doing research, and if you can't come up with your own question to research, or you don't find a research program to get involved in, definitely take time to talk to a professor and say, hey, what are you working on? Is there a way that I can help out, help out in your lab or help you do surveys or something like that? But the idea is basically to add to your college experience by not just being in the classroom, but doing something that's practical as well, so that when you're writing your resume or you're in that interview room, you can show them that you've actually done something. You haven't just read about it, but you've actually been doing it. Not only did I study engineering, but I did some engineering while I was in school. Not only did I study politics and policy, but I wrote some policy suggestions, and I studied policies on the international stage. Not only was I a chemistry major, but I participated in chemistry cutting edge research or something like that, and be able to show that you've done something in addition to just go to school. Some other things you can do in school is definitely some relevant part-time jobs. That's probably one of the best things you can do, because you can show an employer that you had a skill that someone actually paid you to do. So if you got some web design skills, or you're really good at writing articles, and you can work for your school newspaper or for the local newspaper writing articles. Maybe you're a good programmer and you help develop apps or something like that. Maybe just think whatever it is you're studying or whatever it is you're interested in, just really take the time to think, so how can I get a job, or how can I freelance doing this thing and making a little money, not necessarily so that you can get rich off of it, but so that you can set yourself up to be able to have something else to put on your resume and say, I did this and I'm so good at it, or I'm such a good worker that someone paid me to be able to use this skill. And so that's another thing you can do. And in later videos, I'll talk about in more depth about things you can do during, as far as part-time jobs, and talk more in depth about research and things that you can do to kind of maximize your college experience there. And the third thing that I want to talk about is really getting in communication with your professors. I touched that subject in the previous tip, but I want to take it a step further here and just realize that professors do a lot of things. They have a wide network, and they've just been around for a while. They've seen people in your major and out of your major. They've seen them land jobs, and they can really connect you with a good alumni network. Professors can also point you in the right direction for part-time work and research, as I mentioned earlier. Professors are also good at giving you practical career advice, because a lot of colleges have advisors or an advisor center for each college or for your university. But a lot of times those people are just advisors, and what they do is they get general information, and they say, oh, what, you're a math major? Oh, you'll be good at doing this. You'll be good at doing that. But that advisor really is not a math major necessarily. That advisor isn't really in your major. They're just, doing their best to give you some advice. But if you go directly to your professor, a person who's, worked in that field, is currently working in the field you're interested in, they can really give you some detailed and practical advice. They can give you some steps. They can give you some firsthand experience and say, when I was coming out, when I graduated my degree, I did this, I did that, and I did that. And they can really give you some good advice. And so those are a couple of tips that I have for you to get started if you're still in school and you're wondering, how can I make sure that I'm getting the most out of college? And you're wondering, what are some things that I can do to make sure that I'm set up and prepared for when I graduate and interviewing? if you follow these couple of tips, you'll be on your way to being able to impress an employer at the interview table or whatever it is you want to do. You might find that as you're working your research project or as you're working that part-time job or you're freelancing, you might get an idea for a business to start as well. But the thing is that you got to be proactive about your education. Don't just read articles and listen to people rant about their sad stories about how they paid so much for college and it didn't work out, or about their success stories, even about how they did this and now they're making $100,000 a year. Those are all great. Use it for inspiration and for background knowledge, but just be proactive about your own education and remember that it's all about you. And so that's the end of this video. I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel on YouTube and look forward to seeing you in future videos. All right, thanks.